This is the TK Radio Network.
Because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
If you've got health insurance, you like your doctor, you like your plan, you can keep your doctor, you can keep your plan.
Saddam Hussein has gone to elaborate lengths, spent enormous sums, taken great risks to build and keep weapons of mass destruction.
Did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
What difference at this point does it make? Does it make? Does it make?
Yeah, for you,
those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere.
Well, welcome to Trust but Verify. I'm the skipper, and with me tonight is one of my partners in crime anyway, Paul.
Hey, good evening.
Hey, maybe I should have left out the crime reference. But
yeah, please do.
That's between you and I.
Yeah,
not the radio audience anyway. And also,
don't ask, don't tell.
Also joining us is our insightful, intelligent, and learned station manager and engineer, Sparky, who's on his third hour.
No way.
Wait a minute. I read the wrong line. I meant caustic and argumentative.
There we go. That's better.
I had the wrong person in the building here. Anyway, we're missing a big part of our show tonight. Angela's out sick, and I wish her well. Although she texted me this afternoon and assured me that she wasn't long for this earth. So I guess she must have had those really bad bugs. What did you do to her anyway, Sparky? Have you given her something?
I woke up, and that might have done it.
You didn't push her down the stairs or anything?
No.
Right.
I might have rolled over and not apologized right when I woke up, and that threw her into a fit of sickness.
Well, that happens. Probably the way you did it.
It was the worst Dutch oven ever.
Oh, I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole.
Well, having kids in the Petri dish in the public school system, pretty guaranteed way to keep your immune system up anyway.
Or
and
down.
Your doctor bills. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, we got a lot to cover. Let's get right into this. As I looked over these topics, and as I was doing them, and I looked over them before the show, I also looked over those 7 words you can't say on the radio. I may need some reminding here. This is just crazy. Normally, we don't get into a lot of negative stuff here, and that's really not what this is about. It's about presenting a process that's going on, but it's kind of hard not to get your jaw torqued at some points in time. But let's talk about an article that was in the Atlantic, and it was titled "The War on Stupid People." You know who you are, and we're coming after you. But anyway, it says their first article or the first comment out of the box was, "American society increasingly mistakes intelligence for human worth." Well, I could kind of sort of agree with they're not the same, but I don't know that we mistake one for the other.
No,
but
it sounds like they're setting up an argument to argue against.
Yeah, you know about that, no, wouldn't you? Okay. All right, I'm going to define stupid based on a couple internet searches. I pulled some stuff together.
Oh,
okay,
God. Here
stupid.
comes the Wikipedia.
Yeah. Then I left them alone.
Yeah, speaking of stupid.
Yeah, speaking of stupid. Having or showing a great lack of intelligence or common sense. And then a few other little adjectives here. Unintelligent, ignorant, dense, foolish, dull-witted, slow, and simple-minded. So, it's sort of like stupid can be a lot of different things. It's sort of like it doesn't lend itself to scientific measurement. It's kind of like pornography. You know it when you see it. But they're using this word, and you can see as we go through this, they're kind of interchanging it with unintelligent, whereas we might refer to stupid as someone might be intelligent but still do something stupid. I've done that.
Did you see Donald Trump's press conference the other day?
Last week?
Yeah, that was a little pornographic.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't stupid, though. I thought he did a pretty good job of putting them in a corner. If it's the same one I'm thinking about.
Oh, yeah.
Is it the one
yeah.
sent them in tears?
Yeah.
Well, they're saying that stupidity is often mocked in our society. And what society is stupidity not mocked in? I don't know, there's some nirvana out there where they congratulate stupid people. But anyway, they used the Darwin Awards as an example. I thought that was pretty funny. I mean, who hasn't read the Darwin Awards and had a chuckle and said, man, that guy really was stupid. Hopefully he hasn't replicated. But anyway, they're setting this up, and they're saying that 80 million Americans have an IQ of 90 or below, which would kind of put them in the marginally intelligent. Now, actually, 85 to 115 is average, or what they're now calling normal intelligence. So once they drop below that 85, then they start getting into kind of a challenged state. So they're saying we got a lot of people out there. Hey, this country's got 25% of the people. I don't know if they included kids in that, but 25% of the people just aren't intelligent. So we need to consider that as a society. And then they go on to say how bad it is for stupid people. Feel free to jump in here if this applies to you.
Yeah, speaking of, I mean, this, it just sounds like a setup for a government program or 5.
Eugenics.
This whole thing. Yeah, or eugenics. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like to me too. Well, here's a list of all the horrible things. I feel like somebody ought to be playing Nobody Knows the Trouble I've seen in the background to do this, but it says that less intelligent people are more likely to suffer some types of mental illness. Now, being a person that spent a lot of time working with people that were mentally ill and questioning my own sanity a few times, I'm going to have to call BS on this one. If you've ever been in a college environment, you know how neurotic, the faculty are in those places, and paranoid, delusional sometimes. I had a psychiatrist at work in the hospital I was an administrator for one time. This guy was highly educated and really bright, but he thought he was being spied on while he was doing something with a secretary on his desk, which I'll just leave to your imagination. But he was pretty sure he was being spied on because he noticed helicopters hovering outside his office window. I had to explain to him the concept of care flights, but it just didn't seem to register. He was sure this was something completely different. So now, here's an example of people, and we all know people that have had mental illnesses aren't necessarily less than intelligent. So I kind of wonder where they're getting that, but they're painting this is kind of a poor me picture. So, this is one of the things. And they also say that people that aren't very intelligent are likely to become obese. Well, I mean,
okay. Yeah, that really seems like a stretch there. There's a lot of fairly obese, smart people out there. Everybody likes Fritos. Come on.
Yeah. What's the point? I mean, what's the point of
here's the thing.
Painting this picture.
Here's the thing, though, that even if you were to make everybody who is 60%, or even let's just go really, really extreme. Let's say that everybody with an IQ of 30. We could raise their IQ to 180. That then means that we can raise everybody else's well beyond that. So no matter how far, how much more intelligence you make everybody as a whole, there's always going to be the dividing line down the middle. There's going to be those who are in the upper 1%, and there's going to be those in the bottom 30%, no matter where you move it. So is it that less intelligent people relative to everybody else are less valuable, or are they unvaluable?
Yeah, we'll go on and take a look at this. They also say that they're more likely to experience permanent brain damage from traumatic injury.
Well,
I think it's probably just more noticeable.
Hold my beer.
I'm thinking of several scenarios on that. In this part of the country, it's usually a result of a beer in your hand and hey y'all, watch this. But brain injuries can happen to anybody. But what they're saying is they're less aware. I mean, they trip and fall down, how they get a brain injury. They just do something stupid. Do they, stand up on their four-wheeler and get knocked off by a tree limb? But they're painting the picture of this subculture, I guess I can say it that, of people who who have this Jobian sort of cloud. I guess Jobian's a word. It is now anyway. Hanging over their lives. And they're also more likely to end up in prison. And that could be because they're smart enough to get away with it. I have worked in county jails. But even there, I would say those people are more likely to end up in county lockup or state prison, but the really smart crooks, they're smart enough to commit federal crimes, so they get to country clubs. And they're drawn to violence, and they're likely to die sooner, and I guess that die sooner probably has something to do with 1 through 6 above. But so we have this group of people. Now we've painted a picture of them, and we should be a little more sensitive to their plight. And they also say that they can't advance because they can't pass this SAT to get into college. As a matter of fact, it's only about a third of the people that take it actually pass it, which kind of surprised me. I didn't know that. But so you got this large, massive group of people that can't even do the one thing that supposedly need to do in our culture to improve themselves. So
what are they proposing?
Well, we'll get there in a minute. I'm just trying to get you to be sensitive to this issue.
Oh, I'm sensitive.
Oh, it's a tough world out there for stupid people. Anyway, so on the other hand, you intelligent people out there, you haves with gray matter, you get all the luck. Your IQ correlates with chances of landing a financially rewarding job. In fact, someone said each IQ point is worth hundreds of dollars in annual income. IQ point above someone who's stupid, I guess, is worth a lot of money. Well, doesn't that make sense? I mean, that
sure,
you're probably going to make more money.
Yeah, no surprise there.
Now, I know this is true for at least the three of us. The smart guys get the good women. It says right here that, and I was hoping maybe Terrell will get in on this. I wanted to ask the chat room this. Here's a study that came out that said intelligence and academic achievement have steadily been moving up on the rankings of traits in a desired mate, and they're above these other traits. Think about this, ladies. I guess guys too. Is that intelligence and academic achievement more important than domestic skills? Is it more? I don't know. Somebody's a slob. I don't
know. There's a lot of doctors out there with good-looking wives, so I do have to say it's definitely a contributing factor.
That'll be financial success is even more important than financial success. That's still harder to believe. That's right.
I doubt that very much. I really do.
It's possible this was the survey was influenced by social expectations. You don't want to say, I think looks are more important or money's more important. Okay, but they did say that it's more important than looks. And also social ability and health. So I'm thinking you talk to somebody and go, "Hey, Sarah, how did your date go?" And she goes, "Wow, I think this is a guy for me. He's poor, unemployed, he's sloppy, he belches in public, he has high blood pressure due to obesity, but he figured the waiter's chip out in his head. So I'm going to go with that guy."
There are those.
There are those. Anyway, here's what they're trying to say. Here's what they're trying to say.
Okay.
The smart meanies, you guys, you two, are piling on stupid people. You're making it harder for them to succeed. And rather than looking for ways to give the less intelligent a break, the successful and influential seem more determined than ever to freeze them out. Now, here's how it's being done, and none of you guys probably participated in this.
So this is a redistributive argument is what this is.
Yeah, this sounds like the new Democratic Party's campaign for 2020, maybe.
You're too smart. Give it to a stupid person.
Yeah, it's the new identity politics.
Oh my!
That's what it is. Okay, well, they use an example of how bad this is. This poor schmuck that just doesn't have it. The employment website Monster, where you can fill out. I don't know if you've had to do this, Paul, but I
have.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about.
Many times.
So they capture all the current hiring, wisdom. What should you be looking for, and we'll screen for that. And their suggestion was that these managers look for candidates who first and foremost are smart. Imagine that. They had to have an employment website tell them that, but that's bad. Just bad because, it's just bad because people that aren't smart
don't get a fair shake.
They get screened out.
I have an issue with that because there was a court ruling a couple of years ago. I don't remember where it was, where a highly intelligent individual applied for a local police force and he was disqualified for being too smart.
California.
And he took him to court and the judge says no, they can disqualify you for being too smart.
Yep.
So I think from an employment perspective, it depends on the job. You don't necessarily want the actual rocket scientists out there mowing your lawn. He may make that decision that, he wants to be the lawn guy, but, that's not the typical person you're going to hire for that job. You're going to get somebody who has, that's, their skill level. So,
however, when NASA took the big hit, there were a lot of rocket scientists mowing people's yards in Houston.
Yep.
So,
oh, yeah.
I wonder how good a job they did. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you can be overqualified. What's that term? Overqualified could mean, you're too bright. We know you're not going to stay with this job because it's not going to challenge you. You really need something more challenging, and we don't have anything for you. Go away. And that's
one of the problems of having a really good resume, guys.
Is it?
Oh my God, yeah. If you have too good a resume at a certain age, it's really hard to get hired.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Yeah, you end up being overqualified for everything.
Donnie can't get a job anywhere.
Actually, I wish I could say I'm not guilty of doing that in my hiring practices. And what I mean by that is when I have somebody come looking for a job, generally what they'll do is they'll go, look, here's my college degree in XYZ. And on more than one occasion, to their horror, I rip off their education part and throw it directly in the trash because it's of no value. It's not so much an overqualification thing. I just want to see their portfolio. I don't hold any value in their college education.
That makes sense. The other issue that was brought up is that more and more employers are testing potential job applicants on a range of skills, judgment, and knowledge. So once again, knowledge and IQ are working their way into the formula, and that's weeding out this 80 million people.
Yep.
That are still trying to find their place, and it's just darn unfair. Now, here's my take on this, and I haven't had people working for me in a long time, but I'm thinking if an employer is doing a lot of pre-testing on applicants, that tells me he doesn't have a whole lot of faith and confidence in the fact that they may have gotten a solid education, even if they are coming out of a university, maybe even a good university. So it's kind of like, show me. Let me check this out for myself. I would think that. I mean, everybody wins, everybody passes. What does that sheepskin mean anymore? What does a high school diploma mean?
Nothing.
5th grade reading level across the country.
Or you could say the same thing, that employer, they're using that testing because they don't trust the judgment of the employees they already have that are tasked with making those hiring decisions. If you trust your hiring managers, to hire the best qualified candidate for that job, why would you need, that additional testing?
That's a good point. If you don't think they can screen well, maybe it have something to do with their history of hiring too. But more and more people are putting faith in that kind of tests. I I was going to be a stockbroker many, many, many moons ago. Hadn't been out of the Marine Corps too long, and I interviewed for a job in Dallas, and I got the job, but I had to take a psych test. And the guy said, "Take a psych test and come back, and I'll hire you." Well, I flunked the psych test, and the reason I flunked it at the time, I knew nothing about any of this stuff, is it had questions on there like, "Okay, what would you rather do? Go out to dinner with a beautiful woman, or work a couple extra hours and land an account?" Well, I'm thinking, well, I better not answer this one. I better put down 2 hours. Guess what? They said, no, this guy would be able to maintain relationships. He's just too rigid, etc. So
no,
I ended up not being a stockbroker.
Actually, you know what that question is? It's a question of honesty. If you answer that you're going to put in the extra couple hours rather than going out on the date, you're lying.
A lot of stockbrokers would, though.
Well,
I thought my wife probably had put that thing in there. I wasn't taking any questions. Yeah. Any chances. Okay, so here's a question for anybody. Tara, Joan are out there. Is pre-testing employees, is that unfair? Are we unfairly weeding out some potentially good employees just because they may not be able to hit the benchmark that some of the others can hit? For example, like the SAT, some employers are requiring that now, and they're weeding out anyone that didn't score in the top 5%.
No.
5 percentile.
No, it's
not. Is that unfair?
I think it depends on what you're interviewing them for.
Well, yeah.
I mean, are you interviewing them to be a short order cook, or are you interviewing them to be a psychologist or a stockbroker? I worked in restaurants for a very long time, and I've done a lot of interviewing, and a lot of people seem to not like interviewing. I actually like it, and I don't like those little scripts they give you. But I've come across some really, really smart people who I've hired, despite the danger that they might move on, because they were honest with me. Like, I always hated that answer to the question. Like, I interviewed a lot of servers and a lot of line cooks. And a lot of servers would say, you'd say, why do you want to do this job? Well, because I like people. Because I just love people. I love to be around people.
Next.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Right. The guy who answered me, because I'm good at what I do and I know I can make money at this. I didn't even ask him another question. I said, okay, when can you get here? When can you be here? But he throughout the interview that I had with him, very highly intelligent, way overqualified. But sometimes it's worth a shot. So I think that in mechanizing a lot of what we do when it comes to these interview sites and these sites that pass on only the correct candidates, we are, like you said, we're pushing a lot of people away who might otherwise be good for the position. And these tests do work to a certain extent, but not always. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was looking at a reference from a Harvard Business School professor, which normally I look right over those, but anyway. He argued that smart people can make the worst employees, in part because they're not used to dealing with failure or criticism. I'm not sure. I've had a lot of bright people work for me, and they handle criticism. Most of them didn't fail, so I guess, if you're really bright.
It depends on the kind of smarts you're talking about. Are you talking about academic smarts, or are you talking about street smarts? A guy from the street is often going to be a lot more open, in a lot of cases that I have found, to constructive criticism to a certain extent. Somebody who's academic tends to be like, hey, I've been to school. I've paid $60,000 a year for my education. I know this.
Yeah.
It depends. Again, it depends on the person and what you're hiring them for. And I think that's why, from the position that you're interviewing for, you really do have to have that interaction with who you're interviewing, rather than handing it off to a company and this test, this just completely blind test that has no empathy or anything else.
Yeah.
I agree with Hatch on that. I've done a lot of interviewing. I've spent many years in the financial sector, and I don't even use the stock interview questions when I interview people. And I've interviewed anybody from a entry level position sorting mail up to management positions, right. And I go into an interview to have a conversation. I have a conversational interview.
Right.
I do not use any pre-canned questions. I don't ask them what their favorite color is. I don't want to know, how they, necessarily, handled a situation when they were in school. I go in there and just have a conversation with them. You find out way more about a person, and you get them way more comfortable, and you really find that person's personality.
Exactly.
And then you can gauge whether or not they're going to be a good fit for a job. Just a straight intelligence test is not going to do that in many cases.
Nope.
Tara asked a question, are the SATs following Common Core now? I don't think Common Core has been out there long enough, but I think that's a goal. I think they're trying to tie the two together. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure they're going to use SATs anymore. I read somewhere they're looking at another test, but I read a lot of things and forget half of it. I could be wrong, but eventually, if Common Core is essentially what? Common Core for everyone across the country. So I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to standardize a test using that as a foundation.
But it's going to be like any other test, whether it's Common Core, it's the SAT, anything. Some people are good at taking a standardized test, some aren't. You're not going to get, the true personality out on someone based on any kind of standardized test. Excuse me.
And
let me ask you this. Well, I was just gonna. No, Hatch, go ahead. I'll ask just a minute.
Okay. Well, it flies in the face of any training program you've ever been in. I've done a lot of training programs, and I've done a lot of training in my life. And when they teach you how to train people, one of the first things they teach you is that people learn in different ways, and they break it down often into 4 different quadrants. So that flies, and it's true that people do learn in certain. Some people are tactical, some people are audio, some auditory, some people. It depends on who you're dealing with and how they learn. So any standardized system is going to leave a lot of people in the dust. And what Paul just said is dead on. A lot of people are amazing at taking tests, but they honestly suck in the real world.
Yeah, so just two different skills.
Exactly.
Yep. And skill is the key word there.
Yeah.
Yep.
One is learned, actually. I mean, I used to do hypnosis for people that had test anxiety just to improve their testing. Paul even worked with realtors having the little ladies in Dallas that had trouble passing their real estate exams. And it works. They had the information, they had the knowledge, they just freaked out and froze up. And you can have really intelligent people that fail at that level because of that. Let me get into the solutions here. I'm not sensing a whole lot of sympathy from this crowd for stupid people, but anyway, here's their solutions. Some of the money, and I agree with this one, some of the money pouring into educational reform should be diverted to creating more top-notch vocational education programs. Okay, we had that when I was a kid. And today they call it career and technical education. It says right now only 1 in 20 U.S. public schools is a full-time CTE school. I'm not sure how to differentiate, but clearly 1 in 20 doesn't sound like a good number. That will work as long as there's a job to go to. I mean, the way it used to be set up, then you went out and you worked during, for Farmer John or the hardware store or something for your voc ed, and then you had a job when you got out of school. That's the way I remember it. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing concept. Something that they've been trying to get away from for 30 years and sending everybody to college, and all of a sudden they want to go back to the former model. Come on.
That's what they're saying. That's exactly what they're saying.
Well, they sold college a little bit too hard, if you ask me.
Oh, absolutely.
And one thing, Skipper, you said there's not a lot of sympathy for stupid people in this crowd. I would like to kind of go against that a little bit, okay. in that what I said prior to this about training is, and it goes back to who was it that said Einstein? Was it Einstein? If you try to teach a fish to ride a bicycle, you're going to think he's stupid. People learn in so many different ways that you can easily put somebody into that category of being stupid when they're just not learning the way you think they should. So I actually, I've worked with many, many people who have cognitive issues,
Yeah.
And you just have to approach them a certain way and a different way. And they may not be as on the ball thinking wise, but some of those people have become the best at that particular position that I've ever seen.
And this little community. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, the approach. I think the approach is key, and you do have to have patience for the quote unquote stupid people.
When I was growing up back, horse and buggy days, well, I was in a really small, dirt street community there in southern Oklahoma for many of those years, and I went to school with a lot of country kids. That's what we were, and I can only think of one person in all those years I was in that school that I would put in the category that they're using now as unintelligent. Now, have people gotten less intelligent over time? I don't think so. Number one, we had a good school system. People learned. They were challenged, expected to learn. They may not, my friend Dan may not go into that physics class with me because he doesn't want to. He may go, take another advanced shop class or something. But he didn't lack intelligence. And the community took care of the very few people that fit into the category you were talking about. And they always had work. They either worked with their families or they worked in the feed store sweeping up or whatever. The community found a place for them. Now, I know that's easy to say in a small community and trying to change the scale and say, okay, well, how do you do that in Chicago or any large city? Well, you probably can't. My point I'm beating around the bush with is I don't think there's that many people that are unintelligent. I don't think that's changed all of a sudden. I think, Paul, you used a term sometime this afternoon. I wish I could remember what it was, where people are willfully ignorant. And you use that term?
Cognitive dissonance. Is that
cognitive dissonance is willfully ignorant.
Different conversation.
Yeah, willfully ignorant.
Willfully ignorant.
Yeah, and I think what you have, because you have a bunch of people that are now a bunch of kids, and kids aren't mature by definition, put in a learning environment that isn't a learning environment, and they're going to get away with as much as they can get away with and learn as little as they have to and produce as little as they have to. So now you have this large cadre of people in that school system that aren't excelling. They're not trying to excel. They're not thinking about their future. They don't care, and there's no one there to shepherd them along. So now all of a sudden we have this massive number of people that fit in the category of being stupid or less intelligent. I'm afraid I'm not buying it. I just don't think it's as big a problem as these people are putting it out to be. It may be on paper. It may be they don't test out well. But,
well, and that's the thing. You've got to look at what the standard of measurement is on this. A good friend of ours, Skipper, couldn't. And you'll know who I'm talking about in a moment. It would take him, half a day to read a 3-page magazine article. But if you put a broken toaster in front of him, he would have that thing disassembled and fixed inside of 5 minutes, and had never looked at the inside of a toaster before. The guy was not book smart, but he was a mechanical genius. He could fix anything. So what's your yardstick that you're using to measure this? If you're only measuring, based on some standardized written verbal math test, you're gonna cut out a lot, that 25% of the population right there. You've got to broaden your means of measurement to capture different forms of intelligence.
Well, you do. Sparky, you brought this up, and I just wanted to let you know you're right. Here's one of the solutions.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, here's one of the solutions. I throw you a bone here every now and then. The government, here's a comment verbatim. The government could, for example, provide incentives to companies that resist automation, thereby preserving jobs for the less brainy. That is their quote, not mine. I'm calling this hire my nephew and I'll forget the money you owe me system, but they're looking at subsidizing these people.
They're looking to subsidize the stupid people.
Right.
It's just redistribution. That's all it is.
That's what.
Yeah, and right now, close the border, and that problem will fix itself.
Well, they had another solution, and because I want to move into the next segment, but they have another solution. It said that the government could also discourage hiring practices. Get the point? Discourage hiring practices.
Yeah, so
that arbitrarily and counterproductively weed out the less well IQ'd. Whoever wrote that couldn't have been too well IQ'd, but anyway. So now, how would a government go about discouraging hiring practices? And we call those quotas here not too long ago.
They could even go as far as penalizing you for engaging in hiring practices that are just straight up undesirable to them.
Yeah,
well,
and you could use various taxation and schemes to encourage what pool of labor you were drawing from.
There. Well, Hatch, this is in your backyard. Are you still on with us?
I'm still here.
All right. University of Washington declares proper grammar is racist. I don't know. This has all happened since you moved out there. That's all. I hadn't noticed Washington being that liberal. You must be driving them all into a frenzy there.
Oh, well, that's what it is they're reacting to my conservatism on that. Oh, we got to get worse. We got to get worse.
Can we call it overreacting? Okay, now this comes out of the Writing Center, the WRITING, as opposed to the Writing Center at the University of Washington. And they're saying that students at hang on, let me reread this. The Writing Center at the University of Washington is telling students that expecting Americans to use proper grammar perpetuates racism. And as Tara said about 15 minutes ago, didn't we have a Ebonics here a while back that was supposed to have all that? And anyway, they're saying, now this is coming from the Writing Center, there is no inherent standard of English.
Really?
Really?
I think the Oxford English Dictionary would disagree.
Yeah, and a lot of classes I went through as a kid would disagree.
Yeah. How many times have you been asked a question?
Yeah, right.
I would have been because you fail out. I mean, there has to be a standard. Now, and I have this argument a lot with a lot of because I am what might be considered a grammar Nazi. I really am not, and I don't necessarily resist the change of language because that's how language has evolved. If we were to go back 200 years, none of us would be understood at all, and none of us would be able to understand most of what everybody else was saying, and they'd be saying it in English.
Yeah. Try reading the Federalist Papers.
Right. English evolved. Every language evolves, and it evolves through things that just through natural processes. Now, those natural processes have been sped up enormously due to the computer age. But it's still a natural process, and we resist because we want to keep those standards to a certain extent so that we don't feel burnt out and left behind. But language will always evolve. So it's a little tough to be a grammar Nazi and at the same time have that awareness that it's going to have to evolve. It's going to move on. But
you can allow that evolution to happen and still have standardization. And the example I'll use is not language related. It's tool related. Look at a flathead screw versus a Phillips head screw. They're both standardized. They have a standard thread pitch. You can use a standardized tool to turn that screw. However, as needs change, you move from a flathead to a Phillips head to now we're getting into Torx head screws.
Hex head, right?
So you can keep that standardization and allow that evolution to continue, and you're not losing anything there.
Yeah, you're incorrect. Anybody that uses a flathead is an idiot.
Well, yeah.
I prefer Robertson, but nobody else does. So.
Okay, so you, and that's a good example. So, what they're saying is, well, language is constantly changing. Pretty much what you said. Therefore, and there are no real rules, no real standards. So if you're holding someone to a standard, then you're being a racist and you're holding them back because they don't sound like you do, and you have trouble understanding them. But there is a standard, and there has to be a standard.
It sounds like a bunch of Yankees are doing this.
You guys,
and it's very hard to teach, though. That's one of the things you have to understand. It's very hard to teach that there is a standard that's always morphing. So if it's a standard, it's not supposed to morph, right? But in language, there is a standard, and there are rules, but at the same time, it's always evolving, and that's a real hard concept to get across, I think.
Well, look at there's one part on an automobile that hasn't changed since the first automobile was manufactured, and no, not the steering wheel. But do you know what that part is? It's a Zerk fitting.
The pedal.
It's a Zerk fitting that screws in, to the wheel or to the so you can air your tire up. That hasn't changed. That's pretty much. I'm saying the Zerk fitting. I'm sorry for lubricating. The Zerk fitting for lubricating hasn't changed. So it's a standard. I mean, the cars have changed, but standardization is standardization. The whole ship can move forward, and it's in a different place, and it may even be a little different when it moves forward, but it's still a ship. So if you go there to the extent they're wanting to go, there's no standardization whatsoever. It's not.
Have you worked on cars lately? Those Zerk fittings are disappearing.
Are they? Yeah, I know they are. Like on
some cars, you can't even find
stuff.
them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. That's so those U-joints wear out, and you have to have them replaced instead of keeping them lubricated.
They have permanent closed fittings now. It's really weird.
Yeah, it's like sealed bearings.
Yep.
So they say language is a bridge between ideas and action. Okay. So how we use words has a lot of influence on what we think and do. Well, she just argued against her whole case. If you're going to bridge between ideas and actions, you better be able to communicate that to as many people as possible. And that's where language standardization of communication, is essential. If we had the old radios, Hatch, that we used to have years ago, and you were talking, you had to go over and release it, and next person would talk, and they'd go over. And I mean, everybody had to do it the same way. It was a communication system. If my point on this personally is, don't expect to thrive in a society if you insist on doing everything completely different, independent of everything.
Have you ever walked into a restaurant kitchen?
Yeah, I grew up in them.
Okay, you grew up on them. I grew up in them. And I'm going to ask you this as a restaurant kitchen person. Do you think most anybody who hasn't worked in a restaurant kitchen could understand half or a third of what is said?
No. In fact, it even changes a little bit from place to place where you go. I've worked at a country club and convention center. It's a little different than working in like a regular eating joint restaurant, family restaurant. But no, I don't think most people could. Do you? Hatch?
Oh, did we lose Hatch? Oh no, that's
he asked a tricky question and he left. He's just like Hatch. Okay, well let's.
Yeah, but it's still even if you're changing from place to place, there's a standardized communication form within that place that allows people to convey their thoughts and ideas. And that's the key to this. If you lose that standardization, you're losing the ability to communicate across the board.
Let me get biblical and refer to the Tower of Babel as a good example.
Yeah, good example.
Of why that just doesn't work. Well, I want to get into something that I think is going to be more fun. Not that this wasn't great fun, but let's talk about Orwell. Let's talk about Orwell as a Trump critic, because he certainly was, if you believe anybody that's been touting Orwell over the last month, I guess. As soon as someone discovered that they could use Orwell to beat Trump over the head. As a matter of fact, there's like 90 independent cinemas across the country that are going to show the movie version of 1984. I think it's on April 4th, and that's some significant now.
That's the day that Winston Smith, the main character,
wrote his diary.
Declared his liberation from the from Big Brother via having a personal private diary.
Okay, so we have all of a sudden these people, these liberals, that are discovering Orwell and discovering that they're living in an instant dystopian society that wasn't there. January, I can forget what inauguration day was, but say January the 7th, it wasn't there, or the 15th, or whatever the day was before Trump took over. But all of a sudden it's there. In the last month, we've become Orwell's dystopian world. I'm sorry, but that's laughable. I mean, that's...
Yeah, and all the conservatives are, breathing a sigh of relief because we've just left dystopia. Exactly. So, and actually, I find that the 1984, this kind of goes back to Hollywood and the liberals, I think, because they have a nice, really atmospheric movie about totalitarianism in 1984. But I think if you look at society as a whole with what's going on, the real movement is not towards Orwell's 1984, but more towards Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. With you talk about genetic engineering, which was a big theme in Brave New World. Soma, which was basically drugging the masses and keeping them happy at their jobs. A two-tiered society of the intelligent versus the workers, kind of what we were just talking about. Yeah. Some of this to me, I'm kind of chuckling just because, man, it all goes back to Hollywood with these people.
Well, here's what they've discovered in the last 30 days has begun to happen. This dystopian world is marked by perpetual war. Of course, we haven't had any of that until January. Constant surveillance, controlled by a privileged elite who seek to persecute individualism and independent thought. Back to cognitive dissonance. I mean,
exactly.
How could anyone live through the last not just 8 years, but the last 20 years, last 24 years, and not realize that they were in this dystopian society that was evolving quickly. I mean, after 9/11, it really took off. But we saw the roots of it. I'm sure someone brighter than I am could go back even further than that. But how did these people live day to day? And they're getting into this in Europe too. So let me just say this right quick. The Orwell Society is all over this. They're saying that Trump's first few days of office have been such an explosion, a propagandist grape shot. Many commenters have been reaching for their copies of 1984 and Animal Farm. Well, where were you?
This
post
is
Margaret Thatcher.
Cognitive dissonance at its finest. I mean, the hypocrisy on this is just unreal.
These are supposed to be bright people. They use big words, and they're telling one another. This is what's crazy to me. Gentleman, I had this conversation earlier today about how this happens, but these people are bright and they're talking to one another, and they're convincing one another that this just happened. It just all of a sudden, they're like Rip Van Winkle. They just woke up and looked around and said, "Oh my God, what are those cameras doing here? I guess the new president put them here," and we had a president. We just had a president before this one that got the Nobel Peace Prize before he spent 3 nights in the White House, and
dropped a bomb every 20 minutes of his presidency. I mean, come on.
And they didn't see it. No no complaints about it at all when their people were in office, which shows that there's a kind of a meanness to that form of hypocrisy and a dishonesty that goes beyond just hypocrisy. It's
absolutely. Especially from the Europeans, and the British, I can't believe they're even bringing up, surveillance by the state. I mean, London, virtually every square inch of London is got a camera pointed at it. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me?
You kind of think of this in terms of relativity, okay? It's relative to your perspective. And Trump is not advocating a larger and more authoritarian government. He's actually advocating for a smaller and less controlling government. And for the authoritarian, that is the Holocaust. So these people who are reaching for the book 1984, from their perspective, their personal idea of what society should be is being destroyed. So in relative terms, they're correct. But unfortunate for them, their position is one of authoritarianism.
Well, I mean, they are the ones. 1984 is about everything that they've been advocating for the last 20 years. Right. I mean, it's a total statist, manifesto on, the minute control of the individual by the state, and when you move away from that, I mean, that's Armageddon more than anything else, more than being Orwellian, in their mind.
The Orwell Society made this statement, and it's filling in exactly what you said. I'll just read it. Orwell would have appreciated how the eruption of populist demagoguery in the Brexit and Trump electoral triumphs on both sides of the Atlantic have generated a post-truth anxiety in the mainstream media. The key media institutions of journalism sense a crisis. Well, we could talk about that from a different perspective, but that's how they look at it. And you're exactly right in what you said, Sparky. Brexit and Trump, the populism movement is an antithesis to what they support and what they want.
Well, and journalism has never been truthful. There's always an underlying motive, to every article every journalist has ever written. They write articles to sway opinions. You look at the Yellow Dog journalists of yellow journalists, William Randolph Hearst and that, in the late 1800s, journalists are pushing an agenda just like everybody else. If you're trying to sell a paper, you are going to be pushing an agenda of some sort. If it bleeds, it leads.
Which really leads right into a beautiful segue, this last little quick segment. This week, Julian Assange said, when you read a newspaper article, you are reading weaponized text. Assange discussed the idea of fake news and how his WikiLeaks refusal to editorialize their content and providing pure data has allowed them to publish facts without bias. That's an interesting concept. Now, he did admit we got to stay alive here, so we do drop this news out there when it's going to have the most value and we're going to get the most bang for our buck, but we don't editorialize it. Is that fair? I mean, I have a tendency to agree with him. I think WikiLeaks is certainly more objective and less biased than anything else I see out there on either side of the spectrum.
And Assange has said it himself. I mean, there's a certain marketing factor around what they release and how they release it and the timing and such. But they also give you, a tool to where you can go in to whatever they're releasing and cross-reference and go through it and do the research on your own. And that's the key piece in it, is you're not getting that tool with the New York Times, USA Today, ABC, CNN, Fox. You're getting an opinion crammed down your throat. So, I think that's, I think Assange is right, but I think that's what makes WikiLeaks different is, they give you an ability to do that research on your own. They give you a starting point, to where you can go source that material and make your own determination.
Weaponized, I'm reading something here. Weaponized text is the most effective against the uneducated and the unwary. See how we've tied all this together tonight? Almost
the circle has been
closed. Yeah. Okay. So he's right. People that aren't that well educated, and I'm saying this huge glut of people now all of a sudden that are less intelligent, that weren't less intelligent, back in my era, they're lazy. So they'll take that sound bite, or they'll take that laugh line from Saturday Night Live or whatever, and they'll make decisions based on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say, I would even take that beyond the unintelligent. You have some very intelligent people who, are living, we're going back to cognitive dissonance again. They're living inside their preconceived notion of how things works. They're going to hear that soundbite and, hey, that's true. That fits my worldview. I'm there. Must be right. Let's go on. Take it at face value and never question it again.
Bumper sticker identity. All right, well, let's talk for just a second about what's your first name, Brzezinski, MSNBC, in that morning show? Micah.
Mika, something like that, yeah.
Is that it, Mika? Mika sounds probably better. Okay, you probably all heard about this. I don't know if you covered it tonight, but she said Trump thinks he can control exactly what people think, but that's our job. She later said, now, wait a minute, take it in context. So somebody did, and they took the whole, thing she said, and it still sounded exactly the same way. The media says it's our job to control exactly what people think, and it's not the president's. And, well, I don't think it's his job.
That's the Freudian slip of the year, in my opinion.
Oh, that and the one Hillary made about whatever we were called, undesirables,
deplorables. Yeah,
deplorables. Yeah. Okay, so I have one last quick question, and it's going to be time to go. Do we believe that most people, or even a significant number of people today, are capable of taking pure data? Let's assume it's just handed to them; don't even have to go looking for it, and taking inferences from it, without somebody putting a spin on it for them. I mean, what percentage of people could we rely on to do that?
I think most people. I think most people are capable. They're not willing to.
I disagree. I find that most people are very quick to jump to the easy conclusions and never really analyze the data that's actually in front of them.
I agree. Everybody's their own filter.
Yeah, and that's the willingness factor to me, though.
Sure. Yeah, you're kind of saying the same thing.
Sure.
I'm asking, I guess, that point is, could they if they wanted to? And, it's probably not an easy question to answer. But, hey, listen, we're running out of time here based on the little secondhand sweeping around. Enjoyed it. Hey, Hatch, thanks for joining us. Sparky, thanks for hanging in there with us. And Paul, it's always good to be on with you. I hope everybody has a great week.
Yeah, appreciate everybody's help, and everybody have a good night.
Because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
If you've got health insurance, you like your doctor, you like your plan, you can keep your doctor, you can keep your plan.
Saddam Hussein has gone to elaborate lengths.
This is the TK Radio Network.